I wake up every morning with the taste of someone else's breath in my mouth and the lingering scent of vanilla perfume on my pillow. It started 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday night when the October wind rattled the windows of my fourth-floor apartment like skeletal fingers trying to claw their way inside. I live alone in a 2-bedroom unit in a converted Victorian house on Maple Street, one of those old buildings with high ceilings, creaking floorboards, and radiators that hiss and clank like mechanical ghosts. The building has character, my landlord had said when I first toured the place. What he didn't mention was that the character included strange cold spots in the hallway, doors that would swing open on their own, and the sound of footsteps in the apartment above me, even though I knew it was vacant. I'd grown used to these quirks over the past 2 years. Living alone in a new city, you learn to adapt to the loneliness, the silence, the way your own breathing sounds too loud in the empty rooms. You tell yourself that the shadows moving in your peripheral vision are just tricks of the light, that the whispers you hear are just the old pipes settling. But on that Tuesday night, everything changed. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, when the temperature in the room suddenly dropped. Not gradually, like when the heat kicks off, but all at once, as if someone had opened a door to a freezer. My breath came out in visible puffs, and frost began to form on the windows, despite the mild weather outside. That's when I saw her. She stood at the foot of my bed, perfectly still, like a photograph that had somehow stepped out of its frame. She was tall and thin, with pale skin that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, not a strand out of place, and she wore a simple blue cardigan over a white blouse, the kind of outfit you'd see in a 1950s magazine advertisement for the perfect homemaker. But it was her eyes that made my blood turn to ice water. They were completely black, not just the pupils, but the entire eye, like 2 holes punched through reality itself. They reflected nothing, absorbed everything, and seemed to look directly into my soul. I tried to scream, but my voice caught in my throat like a fishbone. My body was frozen, paralyzed by a fear so primal and overwhelming that every nerve ending in my body screamed at me to run, even though I couldn't move so much as a finger. She tilted her head to one side, studying me with the clinical curiosity of a scientist examining a specimen under a microscope. Her expression was serene, almost motherly, but there was something wrong with it. Something that made my skin crawl and my stomach turn. "Time for bed, sweetie," she whispered, her voice soft and melodic, like a lullaby played on broken glass. The words seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing in my head rather than reaching my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut, certain that when I opened them, she would be gone. This had to be a dream. A nightmare brought on by too much caffeine and too little sleep. But when I finally found the courage to look, she was closer. Much closer. She stood beside my bed now, looming over me like a shadow cast by candlelight. Her pale hand reached toward me, fingers that seemed too long, too thin, too cold. I could see the veins beneath her translucent skin, dark and twisted like the roots of a dead tree. "Don't be afraid," she cooed, her breath smelling of vanilla and something else, something sour and rotten underneath, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. "I'm here to take care of you." Her hand touched my forehead, and it was like being caressed by winter itself. The cold seeped through my skin, into my bones, into the very marrow of my being. My entire body went rigid, every muscle locked in place as if I had been flash frozen. She began to hum a tune I didn't recognize, something low and haunting that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. The melody seemed to wrap around me like invisible chains, binding me to the bed, to the moment, to her presence. Then she pulled my blanket up to my chin, tucking the edges carefully around my body with the methodical precision of someone who had done this countless times before. Her movements were slow, deliberate, practiced. She smoothed the fabric with her pale hands, adjusting the corners, making sure every inch of me was covered. It felt like being prepared for burial. "Sweet dreams, little one," she whispered, her black eyes boring into mine one last time before she began to fade like smoke in the wind. And then she was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face hovering in the darkness, those black eyes reflecting my own terrified expression back at me. I told myself it was a nightmare, a product of stress and too much caffeine before bed. But the vanilla scent lingered on my pillow, sweet and cloying, and my blanket was still tucked around me exactly as she had left it. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink, I stumbled to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. In the mirror, I looked like death, pale, hollow-eyed, with dark circles that made me look like I'd been punched. My hands were shaking as I reached for my toothbrush, and I noticed that my skin felt different somehow, as if it had absorbed some of that supernatural cold. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and spent the day trying to convince myself that what I had experienced was just a particularly vivid nightmare. I researched sleep paralysis, night terrors, hypnagogic hallucinations, anything that might explain away the woman in my bedroom. But deep down, I knew what I had seen was real. The vanilla scent still clung to my pillow, no matter how many times I changed the pillowcase. The temperature in my bedroom remained several degrees colder than the rest of the apartment, and I could swear I felt eyes watching me from the shadows. That evening, I decided to stay awake. I planted myself in the living room with all the lights blazing, a pot of coffee brewing, and my laptop open to a marathon of comedic videos. I was determined to prove to myself that she wasn't real, that my mind had simply conjured her from the depths of my subconscious fears. But as 11:47 p.m. approached, the exact time she had appeared the night before, the lights began to flicker. The temperature dropped so suddenly that I could see my breath in the air, and the coffee in my mug started to steam in the sudden cold. "You should be in bed," came her voice from behind me, soft and disappointed, like a mother scolding a child who had stayed up past their bedtime. I spun around, knocking over my coffee mug in my haste. The hot liquid splashed across my laptop keyboard, but I barely noticed. She stood in the doorway to my bedroom, her pale face eerily calm in the strobing light. She looked exactly as she had the night before, the same blue cardigan, the same neat bun, the same black eyes that seemed to drink in the light around them. In the artificial illumination, I could see details I had missed in the darkness. Her skin was translucent like rice paper, and I could see the dark network of veins beneath the surface. Her lips were blue, the color of hypothermia, and when she smiled, I glimpsed teeth that were too sharp, too white, too perfect. "I'm not tired," I stammered, backing away from her until my spine hit the wall. She took a step forward, and I noticed that her feet didn't quite touch the ground. She hovered an inch above the hardwood floor, her body swaying slightly like a hanged man in a gentle breeze. The sight made my stomach lurch and my vision tunnel. "Oh, but you are, sweetie," she said, her voice taking on a hypnotic quality that made my eyelids feel heavy. "You're so very tired. You've been tired for such a long time." As she spoke, a wave of exhaustion washed over me. It wasn't natural tiredness, it was something else. Something that felt like it was being poured into my veins like molten lead. My limbs felt impossibly heavy, and my thoughts began to blur at the edges. "That's it," she whispered, gliding closer with that same serene expression. "Just let go. Let me take care of you. Let me help you rest." I tried to fight it, tried to force my eyes to stay open, but the drowsiness was overwhelming. It pulled at me like a riptide, dragging me down into its depths. The last thing I saw before unconsciousness claimed me was her face leaning over mine, those black eyes reflecting my own terrified expression like twin mirrors. When I woke up, I was in my bed again, tucked in tight with the blanket pulled up to my chin. The vanilla scent was stronger now, as if it had seeped into my very skin. I showered 3 times that morning, scrubbing until my skin was raw, but I couldn't wash away the smell or the memory of her touch. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't live with the uncertainty, the fear, the constant dread of what might happen when night fell. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to find them. The Riverside Public Library was housed in a beautiful old Carnegie building downtown, its reading rooms filled with the comforting smell of old books and polished wood. I made my way to the local history section, a dusty corner of the building where yellowed newspapers and faded photographs told the stories of people long dead. I spent hours digging through records, city directories, and newspaper archives, searching for any information about my building at 47 Maple Street. What I found made my blood run cold. The Victorian house had been built in 1923 by a wealthy merchant named Theodore Holloway. After his death in 1941, his widow, Catherine Holloway, had converted the property into a boarding house for young women. The newspaper advertisements described it as a safe haven for working girls, with maternal supervision and care. Mrs. Catherine Holloway was photographed frequently in the local society pages of the 1940s and early 1950s. She was active in church committees, charity organizations, and various women's groups. In every photograph, she wore the same style of clothing, conservative dresses, sensible shoes, and always a blue cardigan. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she had a kind maternal face that radiated warmth and respectability. But as I dug deeper, I began to find disturbing details hidden between the lines of glowing newspaper coverage. A 1951 article mentioned that several tenants had complained about Mrs. Holloway's excessive concern for their welfare. Young women reported that she would enter their rooms at night without permission, insisting on checking that they were safely tucked in. Some had tried to move out, but found their belongings mysteriously missing, or their deposits withheld for frivolous reasons. The 1952 police report, buried in the back pages of the Riverside Gazette, described a wellness check at the boarding house. 3 tenants had been found dead in their beds over the course of a month. All young women in their 20s, all in apparent good health. The cause of death was listed as heart failure in each case, but the officer noted that the victims looked strangely peaceful and were discovered tucked in as if for a long sleep. The most chilling discovery came in a 1954 obituary for Mrs. Catherine Holloway herself. She had been found dead in her own bed, surrounded by photographs of all the young women who had lived in her boarding house over the years. The photographs showed the tenants in their beds, all tucked in tight, all looking directly at the camera with glassy, lifeless eyes. Mrs. Holloway's cause of death was also listed as heart failure, but the coroner noted that her body was perfectly preserved and appeared to have been dead for several days before discovery. More disturbing was a detail mentioned only in passing. In the background of one photograph, Mrs. Holloway's reflection could be seen in a mirror. While her physical form appeared normal, her reflection showed something else entirely, a gaunt figure with hollow eyes and too many teeth. I stared at the microfilm screen until my eyes burned, trying to process what I was seeing. The woman who had been visiting me looked exactly like Catherine Holloway, down to the blue cardigan and neat bun. But she had been dead for nearly 70 years. As I gathered up my notes and prepared to leave, I noticed something else in the obituary that made my hands shake. Mrs. Holloway had died on October 15th, 1954, exactly 70 years to the day before I had first seen her in my bedroom. That night, I tried to turn my apartment into a fortress. I pushed furniture against the doors, covered every mirror with bedsheets, and scattered salt across the thresholds. Anything I could think of that might keep her away. I armed myself with a flashlight, a kitchen knife, and a recording device, determined to document whatever happened. I barricaded myself in the bathroom, the only room in the apartment without windows. I locked the door and shoved the vanity cabinet against it, creating what I hoped would be an impenetrable barrier. Then I sat in the bathtub, clutching the knife, and waited for 11:47 p.m. to arrive. The minutes crawled by like hours, every creak of the building, every whisper of wind, every distant sound from the street made me jump. I watched the clock on my phone, counting down the seconds until she would appear. At 11:46, the lights began to flicker. The temperature dropped so rapidly that frost formed on the bathroom mirror, and I could see my breath in thick, billowing clouds. My phone's battery, which had been at 80%, suddenly died, plunging me into darkness broken only by the weak beam of my flashlight. At 11:47, she spoke. "Oh, sweetie," Mrs. Holloway's voice drifted through the door, disappointed and sad, like a mother who had discovered her child hiding under the bed. "Why are you frightening yourself like this?" I didn't answer. I pressed my back against the cold porcelain of the tub and held the knife in front of me like a talisman, though I knew it would be useless against whatever she was. "You're scaring yourself with all this research," she continued, her voice closer now as if she were standing just outside the bathroom door. "Those old stories, those old photographs, you shouldn't believe everything you read in dusty old newspapers." The temperature in the bathroom plummeted even further. Ice began to form on the mirror above the sink, and I could see her reflection in the frozen surface, distorted and wrong, like a funhouse mirror image of maternal care. Her reflection showed the truth. A gaunt figure with hollow cheeks, black eyes that seemed to stretch too wide, and a mouth full of needle-sharp teeth. "I'm not like those other women," she said, her voice taking on a pleading quality. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to take care of you." "Help me?" I whispered, my voice cracking with terror. "You're killing me." She laughed, that sound like wind chimes made of bones, echoing off the bathroom tiles. Oh, sweetie, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked down at my hands holding the knife and saw that they were transparent, like glass filled with milk. The veins beneath my skin were black now, spreading like ink through water, and I could see the bathroom wall through my own body. When did it happen? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. 3 weeks ago, she said gently, her voice full of motherly compassion. You were so tired, so lonely. Your heart was weak, strained by months of overwork and stress. You went to bed on that Tuesday night and you just never woke up. The memories came flooding back then, details I had somehow forgotten or blocked out. The chest pains I had been experiencing for weeks, the shortness of breath, the crushing fatigue that no amount of sleep could cure. I had told myself it was just stress, just the demands of my job and the isolation of living alone in a new city. But it had been more than that. My heart had been failing, slowly and silently, and I had been too proud or too scared to seek help. On that Tuesday night, 3 weeks ago, I had felt the crushing weight in my chest, the shooting pain down my left arm, the sensation of drowning in my own bed. And then, nothing. Your body is still there, Mrs. Holloway continued, her voice drifting through the door like smoke. In your bed, getting paler and colder each day. But your spirit, your soul, that's what I've been caring for. That's what I've been trying to help cross over. The bathroom door creaked open, though I hadn't heard the lock turn or the vanity cabinet move. Mrs. Holloway stood in the doorway, her form more solid and real than I had ever seen her. She looked exactly like the caring mother figure she had always claimed to be, but I could see the truth now. The hunger in her black eyes, the way she fed on the fear and confusion of the dying. I'm not the monster in this story, she said, kneeling beside the bathtub with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world. I'm the mercy. I'm the gentle hand that guides you from this world to the next. I'm the last kindness you'll ever receive. She reached out and took the knife from my hands. I was too weak to resist, too insubstantial to hold on to anything from the world of the living. My translucent fingers passed through the handle like smoke through a screen. I found you 3 weeks ago, she explained, her voice taking on the tone of a bedtime story. I felt your loneliness, your fear, your desperate wish that someone would care about you. When you died, your spirit didn't cross over. It clung to this apartment, to the illusion of being alive. You called out for help, and I answered. She helped me out of the bathtub, her touch no longer cold but warm and comforting. I felt like a child being lifted by a loving parent, and the feeling was both terrifying and wonderful. Part of me, the part that had been lonely for so long, actually welcomed her presence. But you won't let me help you, she continued, guiding me toward the bedroom. You keep fighting, keep clinging to the shadow of life. You're making it harder on yourself and harder on me. As we walked through the apartment, I could see it now for what it really was. The walls were covered in a thin layer of frost, and everything was slightly out of focus, like a photograph taken through gauze. This wasn't the world of the living. It was a shadow realm, a place between life and death where lost souls wandered in confusion. What happens now? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Now, she said, her voice gentle but firm, you let me tuck you in one last time. You close your eyes and let go of this world. You stop fighting and accept what's already happened. In the bedroom, I saw my body lying in the bed. It was pale and still, the skin waxy and gray like old candles. The lips were blue, the eyes closed, the chest unmoving. I had been dead for 3 weeks, but my spirit had been too afraid, too lonely, too desperate for connection to let go. "It's time," Mrs. Holloway said gently. I looked at her, this strange creature who had been both my tormentor and my caretaker. "What about you? What happens to you when I'm gone?" She smiled, and for the first time her expression seemed genuinely warm, genuinely caring. "I'll wait for the next one. There's always someone who needs me, someone who's too afraid to cross over alone. I'll be there for them, just like I was there for you." I climbed into bed next to my corpse, and the two forms, spirit and flesh, began to merge. It was like sinking into warm water, like being embraced by something larger than myself. I felt myself becoming solid again, becoming real, but also becoming truly dead. The warmth of life faded from my limbs, replaced by the cold finality of death. But it wasn't frightening anymore. It was peaceful, like falling asleep after a long and difficult day. Mrs. Holloway pulled the blanket up to my chin, tucking it in with the same methodical care she had shown every night. "There now," she whispered, her fingers brushing my forehead one last time. "Doesn't that feel better? No more fear, no more loneliness, no more pain." As my eyes closed for the final time, I saw her clearly at last. She wasn't a monster or a ghost or a demon. She was exactly what she had always claimed to be: a mother, a caretaker, a gentle guide for souls too lost and frightened to find their way alone. She had been dead for 70 years, but her maternal instincts had kept her tied to this world, helping others make the transition she had never been able to complete herself. She was trapped in her own love, her own need to care for others, doomed to repeat the same ritual of comfort and guidance for eternity. The room filled with the scent of vanilla and the sound of her humming that haunting lullaby. Other figures emerged from the shadows, all the women she had helped over the decades, all the lonely souls she had guided to their final rest. They stood around my bed like a choir of guardian angels, watching over me as I took my last breath. But as the darkness claimed me, I heard something that made my soul shiver with recognition. In the distance, from another apartment in the building, came the sound of someone crying. Someone young, someone frightened, someone desperately alone. Mrs. Holloway's head turned toward the sound, her black eyes lighting up with renewed purpose. "Oh," she whispered, her voice filled with that familiar motherly concern. "Someone needs me." She stood up, smoothing down her blue cardigan, and began to walk toward the door. As she moved, her form became translucent again, ready to slip through walls and locked doors to reach the next soul in need of her special care. "Don't worry," she called back to me, though I was already beyond hearing. "I'll be right back. I just need to tuck someone in." The last thing I experienced before the final darkness took me was the sight of Mrs. Holloway floating through the wall, heading toward the apartment below, where a young man sat alone in his living room. His name was David, and he was 26 years old, the same age I had been when I died. He had just lost his job at the marketing firm where he'd worked for 3 years. His girlfriend had left him 2 weeks ago, taking their cat and most of their shared belongings. His parents lived 3 states away, and he had no close friends in the city, just work acquaintances who had already started to forget his name. He sat on his couch in the darkness, staring at the bottle of sleeping pills in his hand. He had been contemplating swallowing them all, washing them down with the bottle of bourbon on his coffee table. He was tired of being alone, tired of the silence, tired of the way his own breathing sounded too loud in the empty apartment. He was the perfect candidate for Mrs. Holloway's attention. I tried to warn him, to scream, to somehow alert him to the danger approaching. But I was gone, my spirit finally at rest, my body finally at peace. There was nothing I could do but watch from whatever realm the dead observed the living as Mrs. Holloway appeared in his living room. She materialized slowly, like smoke coalescing into human form. First, her outline became visible in the darkness, then her features solidified. The pale skin, the neat bun, the blue cardigan that had become her eternal uniform. Her black eyes fixed on David with that same maternal concern I had seen so many times. "Oh, sweetie," she said, her voice soft and soothing. "You look so tired, so very tired." David's head snapped up, the bottle of pills clattering to the floor. His eyes widened as he took in the impossible sight before him. A woman who shouldn't exist, standing in his locked apartment, glowing with her own internal light. Who are you?" he stammered, pressing himself back against the couch cushions. "I'm here to help," Mrs. Holloway replied, taking a step closer. "I can see how much you're hurting, how lonely you are. You don't have to suffer anymore." "This isn't real," David whispered, squeezing his eyes shut. "You're not real. I'm having a breakdown, or the pills are making me hallucinate, or—" "Shh," Mrs. Holloway cooed, and the temperature in the room began to drop. "You don't need to be afraid. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to help you rest." David's eyes flew open, and he saw his breath misting in the sudden cold. Frost was forming on the windows. And the woman, this impossible, terrifying woman, was moving closer with each passing second. "Time for bed, sweetie," she said, extending her pale hand toward him. And I knew, with the terrible certainty of the dead, that David would fight her just as I had fought her. He would research and struggle and try to escape, but eventually he would learn the truth. His heart had been damaged by stress and depression, weakened by months of poor eating and insomnia. He had been dying slowly, day by day, and tonight, whether by pills or by the simple act of giving up, he would join the ranks of the lost souls who called out for Mrs. Holloway's care. She would tuck him in night after night until he finally accepted what had already happened. And then she would move on to the next apartment, the next building, the next lonely soul who needed her guidance. The cycle would continue, as it had for 70 years, as it would for 70 more. Mrs. Holloway was trapped in her own compassion, doomed to repeat the same ritual of false comfort and gentle death for eternity. But here's the truth I learned in those final moments between life and whatever comes after. She wasn't our killer. She was our mercy. She didn't cause our deaths. She simply found us afterward, lost and confused and clinging to the shadows of life. The real horror wasn't that she was a monster. The real horror was that she was exactly what she claimed to be. A loving mother figure, taking care of her children in the only way she knew how. We had all died alone, unloved, forgotten by a world that had no time for the lonely and the lost. And Mrs. Holloway, in her own twisted way, made sure we never had to be alone again. Years pass, decades pass. The building on Maple Street changes hands, gets renovated, welcomes new tenants. But Mrs. Holloway remains, a constant presence in the shadows, waiting for the next soul who needs her care. She has an endless supply of children to tuck in. The world is full of lonely people, isolated people, People who die alone in their apartments with no one to notice for days or weeks. They cry out in their final moments, wishing someone would hold their hand, someone would tell them it's okay, someone would care enough to make sure they're comfortable as they slip away. And Mrs. Holloway always answers. She appears in nursing homes, in studio apartments, in homeless shelters. She finds the forgotten ones, the abandoned ones, the ones who have given up on life before life has quite given up on them. She tucks them in with the same gentle care, the same methodical precision, the same motherly love that has defined her existence for 7 decades. The vanilla scent follows her wherever she goes, a calling card that lingers in the air long after she's moved on to the next soul in need. Security cameras malfunction when she appears, electronic devices fail, and the temperature drops just enough to let you know that something otherworldly is present. But she's not evil. She's not malicious. She's simply a mother doing what mothers do, caring for their children, no matter how far gone they might be, no matter how long they've been lost. The babysitter tucks them in every night, even though they don't have children, even though they don't have life, even though they don't have hope. She tucks them in anyway, because that's what love looks like in the space between life and death. It's patient, it's kind, it's eternal. And in the morning, when the sun rises on another day they'll never see, their bodies are a little paler, a little colder, a little more at peace.